Hi, welcome to On My Shelf. Today I'm talking about the 6 best educational books I read this year. You might think that because I'm a writer, these educational books will only be writing books, but that is not the case. If you've been around for long, you know that I read a wide variety of books, and I'm a little obsessed with learning. It's true that the majority of these books will be writing books, but there are a couple that will cross into a more universal realm. I'll stack my list like a countdown from great to best. So here we go. The 6th best educational book I read this year was Karen S. Weisner's Writing the Fiction series, The Complete Guide for Novels and Novellas. In this book, Weisner details in a very comprehensive way all of the characteristics that must be present in series books. She included brainstorm worksheets readers could replicate, and at the very end of the book, a detailed analysis of several series so that readers could see how things like series arcs and location threads and open loops serve to make individual stories work within a series. I'll definitely be using the advice in this book for any fiction series I write from here on out. The 5th best educational book I read this year was Jessica Page Morell's Thanks, But This Isn't For Us, a sort of compassionate guide to why your writing is being rejected. This is a book about all the things writers do that turn off not only potential agents and editors, but also readers and fans. Morell explores conflict, dialogue, theme, characters, first pages, and much more, breaking down for her readers how to compose successful books and what to steer clear of that could corrupt your masterpiece. The most helpful part of the book was a section where Morell talked readers through revisions and new drafts, because it included a handy checklist that readers can use to make sure each scene and section of a manuscript is as near to perfect as it will ever be. I'll be incorporating her checklist into my revision process and also developing some checklists for my own additional drafts. The 4th best educational book I read this year was Wired to Create: Unraveling the Mysteries of the Creative Mind by Scott Barry Kaufman and Carolyn Gregor. The authors examined characteristics that creative people possess, including imaginative play, passion, daydreaming, solitude, intuition, openness to experience, mindfulness, sensitivity, turning adversity to advantage, and thinking differently. Within each of these chapters that explored the 10 characteristics in more depth, the authors shared fascinating scientific research that showed both the brain science and all the psychology wrapped around each characteristic. It was a very interesting examination of what makes people creative and the different ways that creative minds work. I'll be using the information from this book to explore more creativity practices and sharing those with my readers. The 3rd best educational book I read this year was one I believe everyone can benefit from reading. Anne Handley's Everybody Writes: Your Go-To Guide for Creating Ridiculously Good Content was one of the best resources I've ever read on copywriting. Whatever it is that you do, copywriting is an important skill to develop. This book offers guidelines for all sorts of different copywriting, from pitches to ad copy to blog posts and social media. I'll be using Handley's excellent guide for reworking all my copy across the board in the next year. The 2nd best educational book I read this year was Story Genius: How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Write a Riveting Novel by Lisa Cron. This was a book about brainstorming and was probably the most valuable brainstorm guide I've ever read. Cron included exercises that writers can practice and chapters that span the who, the why, the worldview, and where your novel should begin. She included an ongoing brainstorm that one of her writer friends did, using all the methods Cron outlined in the book. And this made for an excellent example of how to put Cron's methods into practice. I'll be using this brainstorm guide to refine my own brainstorm process in the coming year. And the best educational book I read this year was The Magic Words: Writing Great Books for Children and Young Adults by Cheryl B. Klein. The book included Klein's tips on practical things like principles of good writing, age ranges in children's and young adult literature, and word counts that are expected per age group. But she also highlighted ways to use and develop your writing gifts, how to create a good story concept, how to fashion multi-dimensional characters, how to build bonds between readers and characters, the power of plot, creating compelling scenes, and, my favorite, how to write the best first sentence, first page, first scene, and first chapter. This book was a comprehensive guide on writing for children and young adults. I'll be using all of what I learned to revise several manuscripts in the coming year. Writing is not an easy pursuit. We don't suddenly wake up and become very good at it. We have to work really hard. We have to study. We have to read. So I hope you'll check out some or all of these recommendations and continue learning all there is to learn about writing well and efficiently, cultivating creativity, and running a writing business. Be sure to visit racheltolson.com to see some of my best writer resource recommendations, and pick up some of my writer resources at thiswriterlife.com. If you have any resources that you find valuable, leave them in the comments and I'll check them out. For more on my shelf, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.